What's up, everyone? I'm Sophia and welcome to Storyweaving, a storytime series where we share strange and otherworldly experiences that help weave us on the trail of self-discovery and spiritual seeking. Today, I have with me guest Mary Grisey. Mary is a psychic medium, teacher, visual artist, mother, and a real down-to-Mars galactic gal. Hey, Mary.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Oh yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm really excited about this because if you don't follow Mary or aren't familiar, just she'll do her little plug in later, but you really should. And I'm I'm excited to hear this story in particular because you literally weave stories visually and I think psychically. So to see whatever journey you would like to share with us, I think is going to be a complete experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, so what do you have for us today?
Yeah. Here, let me do this real quick. So yeah, I just thought, like I was telling you earlier, I don't have a particularly like one-off story. It's sort of like I said, a breadcrumb trail of kind of how I came to be. And I kind of call it story of a sensitive child who is a psychic medium child too. I don't have one title, I guess. So this story starts, I mean, obviously when I was born, but consciously remembering when I was about 4 years old. And when I was 4, my grandma, Mary, she passed away in my childhood home. And she's, I was named after her. So there's some really strong significance. And kind of rewinding, when I was born, she had my birth chart, my natal chart cast. So she was also into this esoteric metaphysical world. And of course, when I'm 4, I don't know that, but I know there's a, deep connection. She was also a painter too. So she would be making like amazing landscape paintings. So we had a lot in common. And when she had passed in the home, I, wasn't totally conscious at 4, of like people dying. I just thought it was like, oh yeah, I see her,
Mhm.
I hear her. And I remember there were times where I just saw her as clear as day. But her body was completely opalescent, like a light, uh, kind of like what are those, like cheeseclothy, like
Mhm.
white sort of cloths. But I could see her as almost this like full bodied apparition. And I will say I don't see spirit like that quite um, solid anymore. So
Mhm.
I think that's also another interesting note, how kids can see things like maybe more clearly. And then I would hear her as well saying my name, or I'd hear just like sounds like rustling or things like that. Electronics would go off the hook. And my mom would be aware of it as well. So that would be her mom. But I also was the only one in the home out of 3 other children that really, really saw her, felt her. Um, yeah. So basically since that happened, all this paranormal, sorry, la, 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 started happening, all these events. And I started getting the sensation that it wasn't just her in the home. And that kind of scared me because of the movies that were going on in the 90s, if you remember,
Mhm.
like
Oh yeah.
Sighting, what is it, X-Files, like all that stuff.
Yeah,
And I wasn't
Poltergeist was
allowed to,
mine. Like
yeah,
Poltergeist was the one I couldn't handle.
yeah. I think I just wasn't allowed to watch that one. It was
Mhm.
like way too scary. But I would sit in. My mom loved those shows like Sightings, and she was all into this stuff. So
Mhm.
um, I would really like try to like sneak in and watch. And I was just like, oh my God, it turned this beautiful experience of my grandma Mary being this beautiful spirit. And I would also feel the angelics, and I would feel my guides, and it was so beautiful, the spirit world. I remember it. And then when this started happening and I started feeling the presence of other realities, other worlds, I guess I would just say lower entities, I started to try to shut that down, this like gift. But it wouldn't shut down. And I know there's a lot of other psychic mediums that talk about, I shut it down and then it stopped. And I tried to, and it just wouldn't stop, because I would clairsentiently like I would feel them. So then we ended up like moving houses, and thank God, because that house was just off the off the hook haunted. Like, I don't know. And it wasn't one of those like what you typically think of, like, oh, an East Coast, like older part of the US home. We lived in like Southern California in Orange County. That's where I was raised. And it was just so heavy, this home. So basically, like, moving forward, in my college years, I went to San Francisco State, and I don't know if you've been to San Francisco, but the energy there,
yeah,
like I've lived in so many places, but this city is like, I don't know, like, even it was just like the most heavy place. So when I went to San Francisco State, like 1920, I remember there were a few nights that I fell asleep, and all of a sudden I started feeling this thing on my face right here, my forehead. And I'm not sharing my room with anyone. I'm in my room alone. And I'm like, I look up, and it was in that liminal state right before you're, just drifting off to sleep, in like theta state. And I open my eyes, and I see this boy hovering like straight up above me. And right when he sees that I open my eyes and that I'm aware of him, he like transports himself in a blink, like at the end of my bed, like the foot of my bed. And I'm just staring at him, and he's not moving. He's like 8 years old. He's wearing one of those, I know this sounds so cliche, but one of those newsboy hats, and he looks like 1920s or something like that. And he has, like, I think actually kind of what I'm wearing, like suspender type garb, but he's just a torso, and he is just neon lights, like streaming lights, and I can see the lights moving, and I can see where his legs would be, or the bottom part of the body. It's just streaming lights. And it's not a negative feeling at all. It's just this like, hi, I know that you can see me, and I want you to be aware of me. And this happened for about 5 to 10 seconds. And that's a long time. Like,
yeah. No, I'm
like,
aware.
hi, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You see me,
And
like, yeah.
yeah. And so then, like, he transports again to the end of my room, where my door is shut, and the lights just like vacuum up. It's so weird. They like vacuumed up, and then the last thing I saw was his head, and it just vacuumed up, and then I like was so frozen in fear. I was like, to turn on my light. And I turned on my light, and of course, just like a movie, he was gone. And it was one of those things where I'll never forget it. And I was fully awake. Like, it was crazy. And then I move into this other apartment. Same thing happens. There's a man touching the top of my, a man, that sounds so creepy. A man appeared. And then sorry, let's start from the beginning. Then someone's doing the same thing, brushing my head, and I open my eyes, and there's this time like a man with a beard. Sorry, of course, can you hear that in my background? I hope that it's not too loud.
Yeah, no,
okay.
not at all.
Um, so then I feel this man brushing my face. He has this like white beard. And this time, whereas the child that I saw before felt very neutral, very just curious, maybe a little mischievous, but just curious, this man was like kind of angry. And that scared me. And I was just like I was in his space. It was one of those things. But instead of a torso, I just saw his head. It was like a beard. And he was just like, what the hell are you doing in here? Like through telepathy. And I started having all these paranormal experiences, like when I was living at that time in San Francisco. And in that particular room, I would have dreams and things happening. And I ended up having to like sleep in the same room as my roommate, which we ended up being partners at the time. So that helped. So then all this, it started ramping up in my 20s. And at later in my 20s, like 27, 28, I went on a road trip with my friend, Josh. And we went to the Oregon dunes. We were driving up from San Francisco to visit a friend in Portland, Oregon. And on the way back, we got in this like gnarly fight. And I don't even remember what it was about, but it was pretty stupid. And we park. He's an amazing photographer. So he's like, oh, I want to take pictures of you like on the dunes. And I'm like, sweet, I've never seen it. Let's go. And we park on the side of the road and we're like going to the dunes, and seriously, like Beetlejuice. It's just like the movie Beetlejuice. And I was expecting like a worm to come out or something like that. And we are like, okay, we're done with this. He took his photos, blah, 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 blah. And we go and head back to the car. And we are driving back to this, we went to like the grocery store, like something after that. We realized there were like about 2 or 3 hours that are just gone, missing. Because it was like daytime, like 4 o'clock. And I don't even know if it was daylight savings yet, but it was like all of a sudden dark, like out of nowhere. And we're just like, what? We made jokes about it. And he made like anal probing jokes. You know, like UFO, like we got abducted. But I was like, I think we actually did. Like, no, straight up, like no joke. And it was so weird. I've never had an experience where I'm just losing 2 hours of my time. And, you know, I've heard stories about Oregon as well, that it is a really intense, energetic, like hotspot. So then I'm like losing time, seeing spirits. I'm like, what else is going to happen? And I'm like really getting into the paranormal, back into like embracing it. I have friends telling me, oh, like you look witchy, like read tarot in my shop. And I'm like, okay. So then I start like embracing it in my like early 30s. And I started coming into conscious knowledge of my spirit guide, Ruth. She's my main spirit guide. And sorry, there's major chaos going on with it. And so then I start asking questions, because I'm like, why is all this normal? Is this something that we all go through? Like losing time, seeing spirits, like with your physical eyes, hearing them. This is just all so intense. And I'm just giving you like the really big stories. I mean, there are so many in between that I'm, you know, not consciously really remembering. And so then I start hearing my spirit guide is like, you know, you should do a past life regression, and you should start remembering who you are and why you're here. And I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty scared to lose control, because what happens when you lose control, that that fear inside of little Mary was like, oh, the lower entities will come, you know?
Right.
So I just got brave and I did this, like, it was like a group past life regression. It wasn't even a one-on-one thing. And I had the most intense experience. And the regressionist had us go, into the womb and then from there into the past life. And when I entered this past life, I was like, why don't I have a human body? Like, why I have like blue, purple skin. And because they have you look at like your the back of your hand first and like your foot and then your surroundings. And the surroundings, I was in this like violet world where it was this in-between state of night and day, and everything was phosphorescent, like the plant, the flora and the fauna was like all kind of lit up. And it was seemingly what we would call maybe like an ocean planet. There was like a ocean there. And I saw another being that had sort of like tattoo inscriptions all over their body. And I'm saying there because I had this telepathic understanding. There was no gender there. And there was no clothing. It was just like light. I guess you would call it like light codes. I don't know, like a thing for it. And this being I just knew was my partner or was someone that I was mated with or linked with. And then I could walk towards this water because the regressionists had us kind of experience our surroundings. So I walked with my, it was like a humanoid body type, very tall, like maybe 8 feet tall or something like that. And I walked towards this water, and as I submerged into it, it was thick, but it was water-like, and I could like go in the water, and then I could also walk on the water. I could decide if I want to swim in it, submerge, or like walk solidly like on it. And she then had us like look at the sky, look at, all around us. And I could see like a diagonal of maybe moons or planets. I wasn't quite sure, but they were slightly kind of different colors, like yellow and white. And it was like the most insane, beautiful thing like I've ever seen. And the feeling that I got was, this is where I really love to be as a soul. And then I came into this understanding of like, oh, this is why I'm different. This is something that we don't just incarnate here on Earth. There's other planets and dimensional realities and all sorts of things that you can incarnate too. And it was like the most beautiful gift that I was given, because then I understood how, like, why not just me, but other people, like my students, clients, why we're so sensitive is, maybe these memories of these other incarnations are coming up. And so I think that played into, maybe not everything, but played into my maybe sensitivity, even health issues, things like that. And I just wanted to stay in that memory of this planet, but she had to bring us out. So yeah. And I'm almost done. Sorry, I'm looking at the time. So then things started obviously really, really getting intense after that. And I saw a UFO one night. It had like these 3 red lights, and it was, you're like, that's not a plane. I'm like, okay, I'm seeing a UFO. And then it really hit in 2019. when I was pregnant with my daughter, Sophie. And I started having these clairaudient, these like messages. And I'm not very clairaudient to begin with. I can see, I'm very clairvoyant. I feel things, I know things, but clairaudience has just been one of those things where I had to like work on. So this started happening, and I all of a sudden started sensing this council of guides. So in my mind's eye, I would see them as a horseshoe of lights around me, different, mainly like kind of a bluish in frequency, like in color. And they were individual yet merged together like a hive mind. And they started talking to me, and I became aware of working with them in sessions with clients, and then also in my meditations. And they kept giving me this message of the world, the great change, the great change. And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck that means. Sorry, I don't know if we're not supposed to cuss.
No, I mean, I'm on the East
Yeah.
Coast, so that's the only language we speak. But I mean, what other reaction are you supposed to have, And I think that that's
Yeah.
important. Like when we have these experiences, it's never, at least for me, it's never like, oh, thank you for.
Mhm.
It's always like, what the fuck was that? Like it's always that reaction because it's so visceral. So like, please be
Yeah.
honest. But
Yeah.
yeah, what else are you
Absolutely.
supposed to think?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I, being pregnant is crazy enough. I was sick as a dog in my first trimester, holding this, the kids, I guess, are saying starseeds now. So I guess that's this incredible light being, in my body. And I'm just throwing up and getting these messages. I'm just like, oh my God. And so fast forward, 2020 happens. We all
What
know.
happens in
We all know
2020
that.
now?
I know. What? And so this is when I started at this point doing a lot of direct channeling, and they wanted me just to speak through me. And then I'm like, okay. So I started doing this as like writing and stuff like that. And at that point, I had given birth to my daughter. And about 5 days later, my mom had passed away, like almost simultaneously. So this was this, she had passed from cancer. So it wasn't this like total shock, but it was this like, okay, you didn't have to pass then,
Yeah.
And it was just like, wow, incredibly profound moment of this like birth and this death thing that happened. And then it was the point of which I'm sure I could speak for like anyone watching this, is the purge that happened with all of us on a collective and individual scale. And the lower entities started coming back. I started freaking out. All this grief, all this thing. How do I keep a life? How do I take care of a life? And that was the point where I started all the childhood paranormal events started coming back, of spontaneously remembering things of ancient past lives, hearing when I'm nursing my daughter at, I don't know, like 5 a.m. I know, how that goes.
Yeah. It's crazy like listening to this because I've had extremely similar, I mean, we've had these conversations on our
Mhm.
own, but similar experience. But
Yeah.
when I had my son, I
Yeah.
lost my grandfather at the same time. And when I had my
Oh,
daughter, I lost my grandmother. And those are the two people that are
yeah.
closest to me. So I do think
Hmm.
that that's a insane little, I don't know if
Yeah.
portal or what that word is, but there's this like
Mhm.
delicate balance that like I guess turns on some sort of frequency or switches something within anybody
Mhm.
in that immediate surrounding. So it's a pretty wild thing to see you go through the same thing. And the clairaudient thing, is
Yeah.
is well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So, yeah, after that, I had it always happened too when I was nursing her. And I started thinking about the links between mother and daughter, and um, giving life literally from you're just like giving your life force to this little being so it can stay alive. It's crazy. And I started hearing planetary systems that I don't know, like I'm not an astronomer. Started hearing like different planets and things like that. Clairaudiently, they would be like whispered in my ear, almost as if there's a voice just appearing in the room. And it was a little bit alarming, but when the voice would happen, I would be like this, but then I would get a calming, neutral feeling because I knew it was coming from a good place to help me remember. Meanwhile, there were also, like I said, frightening events where I was being shown to release this fear of mine that happened when I was a child. And this all brings me back to knowing that, like, I'm a psychic medium, and that, a channeler and all the other things, and that these events as a sensitive child were all leading me back to remembering, oh yeah, this is your path, this is what you're doing. And maybe it took me a while because I'm 38 now. This took me a while to come back to, which everyone is different and unique with their timing of when they come to that point of what am I doing. But I just feel so passionate about, like, the sensitive gifts that I think all children hold, and that if I had someone to kind of like usher me through and kind of like walk my hand through the process, or at least give me like protection tools or some sort of like boundary, then I feel that I didn't have to suffer this long. It was so much suffering, of feeling so scared all the time. And so I feel, looking back from, what is it, like, what year are we in, 2022 to like,
What is time?
yeah, 1980 or something like
Right.
that, to like, wow, I had to really figure this out on my own. And um pretty insane, but at the same time, it's like, I'm feeling like, how can we help these sensitive children that are coming into the world now. And me being a mother now, growing my family, it's just like, it's so important for me to help my daughter feel safe. And it's not knocking on my mom, because she was pretty supportive, but she didn't have the tools herself to sort of create a safe space for me to even nourish these gifts. And I'm also like, hey, what happened if I would have developed this gift as a teen? I wonder where I'd be at
Right.
now.
Right. Sure. But I mean, you touch on something really important, and that's exactly why I wanted to start the story time is like, I think a lot of us do have a lot of these experiences, and especially our generation that grew up in the 80s and 90s with slasher films and stuff, we started to see that, and there became, because I had the same experience, I would see things and I wouldn't feel it, I would feel kind of indifferent about it, but then I would see the movies and it just created this
Mhm,
fear, this base of fear within me. So I, even if it was good, I was still scared of it. And,
mhm,
I think a lot of us keep this stuff close to heart because especially I run into clients that are like, I'm just not sure. I'm like scared what comes in. And so everyone's just like really tight gripped around this control. And you've
mhm,
even mentioned like that letting go is so scary. So, part of why I do the story time is like a lot of us have gone through very similar things. We all find our way through them. And um they're not as limited or rare as we think. You know, we're never alone ultimately. I mean, you know this, I know this,
Yeah.
but for newer people that are starting to tap in, or people that have tapped in but can't, or haven't like regulated their, discernment, um we're never alone. And I think there's like some kind of level of comfort in that. I was lucky that I had a grandmother that was a folk magician and herbalist and talked to spirits. But the level in which I was seeing things, like, it's funny, you were talking about the neon lights. And the way I
Mhm.
equate it is, it always looked like Alex Mack when she turned into slime, and it was like kind of see through and prismy, because that's
Yeah.
what I would see.
Mhm.
And she could only take me so far. But I agree with you. I think that in recognizing within ourselves, like, remembering that power, and the remembering like what we have, and just being
Yeah.
brave and embracing it, um just in that, I think, is enough to feed that to our children. My son is 16, and I think because he's raised around it, he has such a different experience than what I did when I was his age. Like, he like, hey, I had this dream the other night, and this happened, and blah 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 blah. And like, he's so much more open about it, and very like, no, I've set my mind to it, so the universe is gonna, it, if you will, you can dare, you can get it. Like, it's such a different experience growing up from our, our parents' generation, where everything was
Yeah.
limited and you were doing what you're supposed to do, and the world is, you got to stay in line, or the world is at large, and that includes the spiritual world as well. So I think this is really interesting in this story, because there's a line of all this paranormal stuff that happens, but the same thing inside is like, just be brave, right? Just be brave.
Mhm.
And I think that's
Mhm.
really a really cool thing, a lot of us can use.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and it's not, because I've been developing with different mediums, like different teachers as well, in the past few years. And there's been some teachers that are like earthbound or lower entity, they don't exist, and just dismissing it.
Hmm.
And maybe that's that's their lens, that's their reality.
Sure.
That's okay. But I'm always wondering, like, then why did I have those experiences? Why, um, when that world for me was so magical at first, like, why did it have to shift? And it's interesting, this earth experience, and the journey, and how I'm becoming aware of how many worlds within worlds, that
Yeah.
we're existing in. Um, which I'm sure we can talk about that in a whole
I
different story.
Right. No, I mean, like, as soon as you said that, I was like, I mean, it's just so dynamic. One
Mhm,
person's, and that's something my guides told me, is like, truth is not universal. One person's truth is not someone else's truth. So
absolutely.
even your own truth is not even the truth, because you're seeing
Mhm,
through a lens anyways. There's so many facets to everything. And I think that,
mm,
at least in your story, the key thing here is the discernment, the
mhm,
discernment and the bravery to stick by it, or to continue. Um, I definitely have had my fair share of the stuff with the lower entities, but I definitely have my own perception of what that really means to me. And I think that in my experience, those energies kicked my ass into learning how to defend myself, and honestly get really, really heart centered in how I react to them.
mhm, mhm,
And, it's kind of like on that lower level of, not lower because it's very important, but when someone says they're
mhm,
empathic and they don't know how to control it, it's going from, this is your energy, this is your energy, this is your energy, to like not even having to do it anymore because you've trained yourself so well. But that process
mhm.
always evolves. So even though you've been through the process in your journey, it kicks back in, and it's
Yeah.
just like leveling you up. So I kind of see them as like drill sergeants, you know,
Mhm,
uh, at
mhm,
least in my world. everybody has a divine place. There's always a reason for everything, and regardless if they're lower or not, they're
Mhm.
there for a
Mhm.
reason. So then I'm like, you're not going to take this power. I'm going to give you
Yeah.
a good
Yeah.
reason. Thank you for kicking my ass. Thank you for scaring me.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that thought. I mean, I don't love that you went through that, but
No, I don't even.
yeah. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big believer in like this like we're kind of just in a holographic type universe and a hall of mirrors, you know, of like
Mhm.
this life is really, I mean, again, like you said, it's so many things. This life is so many things and we can change our perspective like that. But I really do feel through my experience, you know, I didn't really talk about how I was able to um, transmute these fears. And I don't think these fears ever really go away, but
Sure.
um, maybe that, you know, but in my experience, it's like, oh, well, how do I see that within myself? How do I see that fear and realize, oh, I see you. That's a fractal of me.
Mhm.
And that's a mirror that's trying to tell me something that I'm not taking care of. Maybe I'm not paying attention to. I mean, there's so many things subjectively, like what is happening going back to me. And, you know, then creating that like safe and that space for myself and that like, you know, because everyone has their, you know, their tools and things that work for
Sure.
them. But for me is, you know, how I teach it is always your belief system and what are you believing? And a lot of, you know, these fears that had come up are really a lot of past life things for me at, you know, and again, this is subjective for everyone of whatever they're going through. But for me, it was a lot of old versions of myself trying to transmute, trying to say hello and trying to clear this energy so I can try to do the work, I don't know, I always say my mission,
Yeah, I
my
mean,
path.
it's
Yeah.
it's the same thing across every tradition, it's the great work, the mission,
Yeah.
all of it. It's all the same, but um yeah, I think that e- even though it's what you're believing, what you said like just momentarily was like it's
Hmm.
always changing, and I think that's okay to allow it to change. And to touch on it, like both of us are psychic mediums that have been doing this for a really long time, and that fear does not change, like regardless of how you transmute it or how you change your mindset to it. There's still times where I'm like, what the fuck is that? You can't
Oh
like,
yeah.
it's never, you're ultimately you're still human, and
Mhm.
even when it comes down to like natural occurrences that aren't necessarily spirits or ghosts or entities, but when they jolt you like that,
Mhm.
I do the same thing. Like, what is it in me that it's causing that reaction? And maybe that can come off as a little
Yeah.
narcissistic, but honestly, if we look at everything as a
Mm-mm.
whole and a reflection, we're looking at all of our environment as us and as one. So
Yeah.
I think that that is a very cool share, and I think it's really really awesome for you to share those multitude of experiences and how it came back, and I think there's a lot of people out there teaching that like I can help you change this and it's going to be gone, because it's ultimately it's still there. Like, we're going
Yeah.
to keep
Hmm.
evolving, we're going to keep leveling up, or, it's just Super Mario, the bosses just get different. It's the
Hmm.
same stuff at the end of each level anyways. And
I love that.
so you can
Love
do this
me some Super Mario.
professionally, and you're still going to need a Yoshi and some flower
Yeah.
power and all of that.
I
But
know
I mean,
Toad. I love Toad.
yeah, and even yeah, even actually Yoshi was always my favorite. I loved Yoshi. I was like, look
Yeah,
at this
so
dumb
cute.
little dinosaur, so
I
cute.
know. With his tongue.
um,
What?
yeah, um, but and when you are looking for guidance somewhere, because all of us, at least I think some of the most talented or gifted people, it's all practice, right? And we're constantly evolving and trying to hone in our practice. Like,
Mhm.
Sure, there's some psychics on there that like get on, they're like, this is what I do. But a lot of us are putting a lot of time and energy into not perfecting, but really crystallizing what we're doing in
Mhm.
this lifetime. But that doesn't mean that these teachers are going to have all the answers that we're looking to. And I think that,
Right.
esotericism is very personal. So, to
Mhm.
those out there looking for guidance, continue to use your discernment because, like you said, you have teachers that don't really believe in that lower entity thing, or some people are like, I don't believe you can transfer energies, and if I don't believe it, it doesn't exist. Well, I mean,
Mhm.
if our
Mhm.
minds were controlling everything, there'd be a lot of wild stuff out there. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's an important uh, lesson to touch on. So I really appreciate
Yeah.
all that you shared, and having a guest like you be so open and honest about like how raw and scary and still it still happens is very, I think, honest and helpful to a lot of people that are thinking they're going to get there and it's going to change, because it does not change. It gets
Yeah.
crazier.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'll say one thing too is in most of my readings and from the story from my life is like what I feel as a story of a sensitive child is that I think that our fears are or our wounds or whatever you want to call it is our superpower. And I think that it, again, maybe not for everyone, but I think for most people that I subjectively have come across, it's like there's something about that I was pushing away
Hmm.
these fears of, the dark, these entities, things like that, realizing, oh no, you're helping people feel safe. You are working with the spirit world.
Hmm.
So it's like merge with it, see it, and that's your work. And so, but not done and done because it took like 38 years to,
Right.
and it's still the story that's unfolding. So absolutely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I do feel the same way. And again, I'm a huge fan of Carl Jung, and the
Yeah.
shadow not being what we a lot of people are calling it as like the murky parts of ourselves, but they're the parts of ourselves that we reject out of fear of whatever has been placed in us, whether it's past life, this life,
Yeah.
programming, whatever. And I think that that's ultimately, again, yeah, your superpower. Like absorbing or really touching in and bringing an awareness to that weirdness, and like ultimately it just wants your awareness, just like these spirits just wants to be recognized, like we're here. I think
Hmm.
it's the same thing, so I couldn't agree with you more on that. And
Yeah.
I'm really, I
Yeah.
mean, you and I have a lot of stuff we agree on, so I'm I could just sit here and go yes, 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 totally.
Sweet.
Awesome. Mary, if anybody wants to check you out or wants to work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah. My website is thewovenchannel.com. And you can book readings, and I teach all sorts of things on there that you can check out. And my Instagram is at Mary Grisey. So just my name. And I think that's it. I mean, I also have a YouTube, but yeah, just go to my website and you'll figure it all out.
Awesome. Well, Mary, thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing with us today and being with us today. It's always a joy to talk to you, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.